Hello, good afternoon to one and all. My name is Naqibah, and today I will be talking about one of the rarest and most interesting disorder called multiple personality disorder, which is also referred to as the dissociative identity disorder. So MPD can be argued to be one of the disorders that has been extensively discussed by psychologists, as it is one of the most controversial disorders that has no consensus of diagnostic criteria and treatment. It is most likely because of the fact that this disorder only affects 1% of the general population. But despite it being controversial, it has been popularized not only in books but also movies, and a recent movie on MPD will be Ptet, which was released back in January. So even though this disorder is more exposed to people now and people are now more aware of what MPD is, there are still so many aspects about MPD that is still not yet known. So this is why some people are more skeptical towards this disorder. So however, over time, with the presence of technology, more things about MPD can be discovered, and we are now able to find a more scientific approach towards the disorder. And this is one of the topics that I will be covering today. So without further ado, let's proceed. So what exactly is MPD? MPD in the DSM is defined as a dissociative disorder in which two or more distinct personalities coexist within one and the same individual. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to ask, how do you define personality? I mean, we all know what personality is, right, as we often use it more or less as a synonym of mind, soul, self. So if that is the case, then we can then argue that as we have different personalities. This is because as we take in different roles, we tend to act differently. So for example, the way I act as a student in school right now might not be the same way as how I act as a daughter and a sister at home. So does that mean we all have developed MPD? No. So there are several things that actually makes us different from people who are actually suffering from the ID. So, for MPD patients, they have two or more distinct personalities, and each of these personalities have their own pattern of behavior. So, the different personalities is what we refer to as alters. So, these alters have their own name, age, sex, or race. So, these alters can be a form of human, but it can also be a form of an animal. So, for us, it is true that we act differently according to our roles, but then we don't develop other personalities and our identity stays the same. And we are the only one that have control over our behavior. Another thing is dissociation. So dissociation here refers to when someone is disconnected from their thoughts, memory, and feelings. Fun fact, we all have experienced dissociation before, unconsciously or naturally. Can you guess when? Excuse me? Well, it's actually when we are daydreaming. So you might look up and then pretend as if you're in a movie or something, or while driving to home you zone out and then you ended up in front of McDonald's and you ask yourself, how do I get here? But then those fall under what we call normal range of dissociation. However, for people with MPD, it is as severe until they are completely isolated from their previous thoughts, feelings, and memories. This is why patients of MPD are often very forgetful, and their forgetfulness can be explained by medical conditions. It is as severe to the extent where they can't even recall personal details about themselves or the people around them. So they could be married to a person for 10 years and they will still be able to forget their spouse's name. And of course, there are more symptoms of MPD, but those are the major ones. Now, you must be wondering, how do a person develop MPD? So the exact cause of MPD is actually not yet known, and this is why some psychologists remain skeptical towards the disorder. However, over time, more theories are developed and on how it can be developed. So back in the olden days, people often mistook NPD as a demonic possession. However, over time, as people are more aware towards the disorder, some believe that this is a developed response to a traumatic event where there were no physical means to escape. So an example of these traumatic events could be when a person is sexually abused. So it is as if we're saying that if that person can't escape the situation physically, they can escape it mentally instead. However, these explanations are not fully accepted by some psychologists, as it lacks what we call scientific proof. So this is why some psychologists remain skeptical towards the disorder. However, with the technological advancement nowadays, we are now able to find a more scientific approach by providing a biological explanation. So far, there is no indication that says that NPD can be passed through genetics. However, for people who experience severe sexual traumas, they tend to develop what we call genetic mutations, and these genetic mutations can lead to serious illnesses and even death. So because of this genetic mutation, children of victimized parents are more predisposed to numerous illnesses. However, it can only occur when this situation is triggered. But we have found a strong indication between NPD and the brain structure. So due to severe traumas, neurochemicals are produced, causing the disintegration of mind, hence resulting the systems of brain to have personalities. So in general, NPD, no matter how many alters they have, they are usually governed and ruled by the two leaders, which is the dominant personalities. So these dominant personalities can be found in certain parts of the brain, which is the cortical and the basal system. So the cortical system can be found under the limbic system of the brain. So as you guys can see, the limbic system is made up of the brain parts, and each of the brain parts have their own functions. So if a personality lived in this part of brain, their functions are only limited to the brain parts that they have. So one example of a function that is missing in the system is a decision-making part. So for personality that live inside this system, it is very hard for them to actually generate or make decisions, as they don't have the brain part that is in charge of decision making. So long story short, the more parts of the brain that the personality possesses, the more ability that, the more functions that it can operate. So in order to demonstrate this, science has allowed us to do so by using machineries that can scan our brain, such as EEG, which stands for electroencephalograph. So EEG measures electrical impulses and detect activities in a particular side of the brain. Hence, EEG helps us to demonstrate differences among various personalities in each person. So these personalities involve mood changes, intensity of concentration, and degree of muscle tense. So from the picture, you guys can see that the electrodes are placed on the person's scalp. So electrical impulses are measured through the electrodes that measure our brain muscles. So another one will be the PET, which stands for positron. PET, which stands for positron emission tomography. So by PET, glucose is injected into your body, and the camera will record the positron and convert data into pictures. Hence, the glucose acts as a fuel, and these red areas indicates where the parts of the brain that is activated during one activities of the brain or during one personality. So glucose is injected in that patient's body even though you can't see it. So yeah, this is how the data is converted into pictures in the computer. So in conclusion, with the help of technology and science, we are now able to clear suspicions toward the disorder as we can now develop a physical cause to MPD. And this allows us to isolate or know the effect of MPD to the physical parts, hence telling us that there is a physical explanation to a mental abnormality. Not only that, with scientific results found, it can act as a formation for further research on MPD. Thus, we can then try to generate a better treatment or identify people who are more likely to be vulnerable towards the disorder. Thank you.
Thank you, Naqibah. Can I ask a few questions? Yes. That was a very interesting talk. I do have some, I'm not very familiar with psychology, so maybe you can enlighten me. You said that sexual trauma in your talk, you claim that sexual trauma can lead to genetic mutation. How does it do that?
Well, actually, I've looked this up. So for now, they can't really pinpoint the genes that actually leads or things that actually leads to the genetic mutation. But there's a proof that genetic mutation do exist in people who have sexual trauma.
Okay. Okay. You claimed in your talk that they think that there's no genetic basis to multiple personality disorder. How do they prove that?
Well, actually, I've looked this up. So for now, they can't really pinpoint the genes that actually leads or things that actually leads to the genetic mutation. But there's a proof that genetic mutation do exist in people who have sexual trauma.
Okay, you claimed in the talk that they think that there's no genetic basis to multiple personality disorder. How do they do that?
So the biological explanation comes in three ways, which is the brain structure, genetics, and biochemistry, or biochemical. So for the genetics, the experiment when conducted would usually be twin studies where we conduct a research on twins and see if there is the genes that they share. Oh wait, let me reconcile my words. So one of the ways that we can find out like for genes, right, is through several studies. It includes the twin studies. So the twin studies, for example, for MPD, right? So there are two types of twins, the identical or non-identical twins. So the identical twins shares almost 100% of the same genes. So if the results of the experiment shows that more identical twins have more chances to developing MPD, that means that there is a proof that MPD can be passed through genetics. However, if the rate or what we call concordance rate is low, then there will be no proof that links MPD to genetics.
Okay. One last question. You say that each personality would occupy different parts of the brain, but then your body is also controlled by different parts of the brain, yeah? So if they occupy different parts, how do the personalities control the body?
So this neurochemical leads to the mind to be disintegrated, right? So that means in each system of the brain, they have developed different personalities. So in this system, they have different parts of the brain, right? So the different parts of the brain have their own functions. So if a personality lived in that particular brain, their behavior are more related to the functions that the brain parts have or has. Can I use my previous example? Okay. So for example, the host, the leader, can be found under the cortical system of the brain. So the cortical system of the brain can be found under the limbic system. So the limbic system consists of this part. So according to one part, they have their own functions, right? So if that one personality lives in this particular part of the system, they are most likely to be in charge of the mood, memory, emotion, fear, anxiety. However, like for other functions, then they will then switch their alters if there is a situation that needs them to function like something that is not in your brain parts. Wait,
Alright, Naqibah, just drawing on from Dr. Ihsan's question earlier. How did your research, right? How did they find out about these things? Like, what methods did they use? Because you mentioned that like EEG and PET scans, right? So what methods can we use to find out that these personalities actually are activated within these brain systems?
So for the EEG, the electrodes are placed onto the scalp. So it measures the input. So how it measures the area of the brain is by the muscle tension. So like so instead of indicating what activity is occurring in that particular side of the brain, it shows us areas in which the area is functioning. So as MPD, like each alters have their own pattern of functioning, right? So they tend to, so one of the functions will be like the way they process things. So the way they process things for each alters are different. So how it can link to MPD is that for each personality, they can then, wait, how do I say this? When one personality comes out, their brain activity will be, wait, no, let me restart again. I think PET will be easier, so I will just use PET. So by PET, glucose is injected in our body, right? So how it can indicate the area of the brain that is currently functioning is by using the glucose as a fuel. So as it converts data into pictures of the computer, it shows this picture, but this one is for cancer. So this red area indicates where or which part of the brain is functioning.
Why a PET scan? Like, why can't we use, like, let's say, an MRI?
Because the MRI is more towards the structure of the brain, not like, so if we use MRI, it only indicates which side of the brain is functioning, but then it doesn't pinpoint us, it doesn't really pinpoint us which the specific area that is functioning. That's the answer now.
It's fine. No, it's fine.
Oh, really?
Yes. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Syakirah, for an interesting presentation. Next, we invite Masturina to continue with the topic.